Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're here, you're probably looking for that fast track to understanding some of the most audacious ideas out there. The ones aiming, well, not just to disrupt a market, but maybe redefine whole global economies. Today, we're doing a deep dive into one really specific, and I have to say, potent source document. It reads less like a blueprint, more like a manifesto, actually. It details this brand new digital ecosystem for world trade, technology, wealth. Our mission is to really unpack this source, pull out its core claims, and give you a detailed breakdown, both the philosophy and the machinery behind it. Now, at the center of all this is a figure named Ash Mufareh, and how the source presents him. Well, that's where you immediately grasp the skill we're talking about. He's not just presented as a CEO or, a tech founder. The text explicitly frames him as a visionary. It claims he was raised by God. Yeah, you heard that right. Raised by God to create systems to unlock wealth for the whole world. We're unpacking the vision of the leader of what this source calls a new digital ecosystem of victory.
Yeah, and I think what's immediately crucial here, right from the start, is recognizing we're dealing with a text that fuses technology with, well, spiritual conviction. The source frames this project, it's called On Passive, not as your typical company, but as a divine design. It's built, or so the manifesto claims, to actively restore things like fairness, dignity, abundance across nations globally. So we really have to analyze every technical detail that follows through that specific, very elevated ideological lens.
That definitely raises the intellectual stakes. I mean, we're not just looking at a business plan here.
No, absolutely not. It's a claim to moral and economic restoration, fundamentally. And just to solidify that global ambition, the movement even has the formal title, the Wealth of Nations Movement. So before we even get into how AI might automate, say, a shopping cart or manage a payment, we have to internalize this. The whole structure is based on the idea that it exists to correct what the creators see as systemic, historical, and economic flaws. It's about ushering in a new kind of global alignment. That's the context that gives weight to every single component we look at.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Grand solutions need grand definitions of the problem, right? So let's unpack this core philosophy. How does the source diagnose the global economic system it wants to replace? It seems to single out two main failings.
It does. And the diagnosis is, well, it's a pretty scathing critique of the current status quo. First, the source asserts that wealth has been systematically, quote, trapped in the hands of a few. Now, this isn't just, a critique of inequality. It implies a deliberate systemic blockage. It suggests the current system is fundamentally broken because it prevents a natural flow of resources. And the second point, which is maybe more resonant for, well, the vast majority of people globally, is the claim that hard work without access has historically led to frustration. That speaks directly to the experience of, say, individuals or small businesses trying to operate, where opportunity is just throttled by barriers to entry or centralized power or even just geography. It's basically saying, look, effort alone isn't enough if you don't have the right infrastructure supporting you.
That distinction is powerful, identifying the lack of access as the key failure point. So the solution Mufare promises, according to the source, it's about fundamentally shifting the nature of wealth itself. The document claims the system literally tears down those walls of restriction, and this is where the language gets really philosophical. It talks about transforming wealth from being an illusion, something distant, controlled, unattainable for most people, into this dynamic flow. Movement of value, intelligence, and empowerment that just circulates freely across this new digital sphere they're building.
Right, and let's just spend a second on the weight of calling current wealth an illusion. When the source uses that word, it's implicitly criticizing traditional financial systems, think centralized banks, fiat currencies that inflate, speculative markets where wealth seems kind of detached from actual production or effort. The illusion is the belief that those systems offer any real stability or fairness. So the promised alternative, this flow, it has to be characterized by something different: immediate, verifiable, equitable value exchange. The idea is that value must be intelligent, meaning it moves precisely where it's needed or earned, and empowering, meaning it actively creates more opportunity for whoever receives it. This commitment to flow really speaks to that core visionary ethos we mentioned earlier.
And Mufareh's stated belief, at least as the material presents it, seems deeply rooted in a human-centric view of technology. This insistence that tech has to serve humanity, not the other way around, which is pretty critical right now, isn't it? The source directly tackles the anxiety around automation. It explicitly says AI should create jobs, not destroy them. That feels like a very deliberate counter-narrative. It's meant to reassure potential users, founders, that this digital kingdom is designed for, let's say, expansion, not displacement.
Exactly. And it connects that purpose to the concept of the digital kingdom. The kingdom is described metaphorically. It's a place where the small and mighty stand shoulder to shoulder. What connects them isn't just the tech access, but shared purpose. This guaranteed fairness and, crucially, automation. The automation engine, in this context, is positioned as the mechanism that enforces fairness by removing human error, human bias. And this leads us to maybe the most unique claim about how the system operates, this infusion of righteousness into the technology itself. The source claims the wealth generated isn't just, an accidental byproduct of a clever algorithm or market share.
It's meant to be more than just profitable.
Precisely. It's claimed to be the result of divine alignment, like the deliberate, coded infusion of technology with integrity and purpose. This is the source's way of arguing that the system is structurally guaranteed to be ethical. The automation is the mechanism of righteousness. If the system automates marketing, sales, payments, and that automation guarantees inclusive access and gets rid of centralized control points, well, then the automation is the integrity. This framing moves the whole structure beyond just a commercial project into something claiming a kind of moral mandate.
Okay, so here's where that moral framework starts translating into, the practical rules for this new wealth. The source highlights three big principles that are meant to set the system apart. Let's start with the first one, inclusive growth.
Inclusive growth is essentially the practical tool for tearing down those barriers we talked about. And the promise here is pretty revolutionary. Every single founder, doesn't matter where they are, their economic background, their existing network, gets access to the exact same sophisticated tools.
Yeah.
This isn't about tiered access or premium levels. It's presented as a commitment to completely level the digital playing field. The idea is that talent and effort, not where you live or how much money you start with, should drive success.
Right. And the second principle is sustainable wealth. The source seems very careful to make a distinction here. They're clearly not pitching short-term speculation. The system is explicitly contrasted with, quote, get-rich-quick schemes. Instead, it promotes long-term digital enterprises powered by this AI automation. What does long-term digital enterprise mean here? It seems to imply a structural, maybe perpetual growth model, where the automated systems constantly maintain and expand the business presence instead of relying on manual input or, speculative market spikes. It suggests stability is kind of coded in.
Yeah, that seems to be the implication. And the third principle ties it all together, empowerment over exploitation. This is kind of the geopolitical angle in the source material. It claims nations rise not through the old zero-sum game of competition where one wins only if another loses, but through connection. The system is designed, they say, not for exploiting resources or labor, but for mutual empowerment. This principle underpins the claim that it will benefit small businesses in, say, Kenya or India just as much as anywhere else.
Okay, let's recap briefly. The ideological foundation is set. A divine design, creating flow, restoring fairness, ensuring empowerment through ethically coded automation. But, grand philosophy needs machinery to work. So now let's move into the actual tech architecture, on passive itself. This is what's supposed to deliver on these massive promises.
Right. This is where we shift from the, let's call it, spiritual narrative to the technical blueprint. The core strength, they emphasize, is the all-encompassing nature of the AI automation. The entire on-passive ecosystem is defined as this AI-driven infrastructure that connects everything, businesses, individual users, even potentially nations, under what the source calls one intelligent umbrella. It's designed as a seamless, integrated system where all the parts talk to each other instantly, without friction.
And the source is pretty clear about what this AI actually does to justify this revolutionary claim, right?
Yeah, so the AI is the backbone. It executes essential, complex tasks that, according to the source, used to take humans months, but are now handled in minutes. This includes really intensive stuff, running marketing campaigns, managing communications, verifying users, processing payments, dynamic customer management. By automating all these traditionally time-consuming, often repetitive tasks, the stated humanistic goal is supposedly achieved. Freeing human creativity to focus on impact. That's the core value proposition, isn't it? Remove the infrastructural headache entirely so the human participants can focus on strategy, creation, connection. That's the idea. Okay, so let's look at the specific named components that are meant to ensure value moves correctly and securely within this framework. Starting with finance and security. The O-Wallet system is presented as absolutely foundational.
O-Wallet, right. It's described not just as a way to pay for things, but as representing financial liberation and digital sovereignty. That's some pretty elevated language. It's claimed to allow instant, borderless, secure transactions globally. But the critical claim here, the part that justifies calling it liberation, is that it offers a pathway for both nations and individual founders to get away from dependency on traditional, centralized financial systems. Those systems, the source implies, are part of the illusion of wealth. By offering borderless capability, the end game seems to be giving founders true financial control without needing traditional banks as intermediaries.
And that true financial control relies entirely on trust, especially when you're talking borderless instant value transfer. Which brings us to O-Verify. The source calls this trust technology and a security marvel. This is basically the identity confirmation system. It functions as their OKYC original Know Your Customer system. It's meant to confirm every identity with high precision. Its explicit purpose is ensuring absolute integrity, transparency, and safety for every user and every transaction inside the ecosystem. The source argues that this level of precise, automated verification builds the foundation for, well, unprecedented global economic trust, which is essential if you're building a kingdom based on connection, not exploitation.
And that idea of integrity built right into the architecture, that's reinforced by the emphasis on data sovereignty too, isn't it? The source explicitly states that identity, funds, privacy, they're secured through something called O-Virtual and advanced encryption. That detail feels crucial. It's not enough for the system to be powerful. The source stresses the user has to retain control over their core assets, identity, and data, which aligns directly with that philosophy of empowerment over exploitation, making sure the tech serves the person, not the other way around.
Precisely. So we have the foundation: automated trust, secure finance. But a digital kingdom needs ways for people in commerce to actually connect and flow. Let's look at the tools designed for that connecting people, facilitating trade globally, starting with OConnect. OConnect is their global communication platform. The source talks about its features: seamless video conferencing, crucially real-time translation, and AI-enhanced clarity for the media itself.
And its stated purpose goes way beyond just a typical video chat app. By building in instant translation and AI clarity, the goal is explicitly stated as breaking down those huge, enduring barriers to global unity, language, and distance. The source claims that through this kind of frictionless communication, things like education, business, even inspiration can just move freely across the globe. Rhetorically, it's designed to be like the functional equivalent of a digital parliament or a universal classroom for this new order, connecting founders from, say, Lagos to London with exactly the same ease.
Yeah, and that seamless connection naturally leads into the commerce engine, OShop. This is the component designed to drive the digital commerce revolution. It's the practical tool meant to deliver on that promise of empowering the small and mighty. And the source gets remarkably specific here. It highlights global reach for small businesses, explicitly mentioning places like Kenya, India, Ghana, and beyond. Nations and businesses that historically have faced massive hurdles getting into global trade. The promise is to instantly give these local businesses global selling power.
And the engine running OShop is that same AI automation we keep coming back to. The platform isn't manually managed. It uses advanced analytics, AI-driven recommendations, targeting, all to fuel the commerce engine. The goal is efficiency and maximum reach for that small seller.
Yeah, and this is where the source's descriptive language really paints a picture. They frame it beautifully, saying something like, every click becomes a bridge to opportunity.
Yeah.
It essentially transforms what might have been a local craft or service into a global enterprise instantly, fulfilling that economic democratization promise through the tech.
Right. And while OConnect handles the more formal, structured communication for business and education, the ecosystem also needs, well, a social heart. The source briefly mentions the role of OPeer, OPal, and OChat. It calls them collectively the social heart and bridges of human experience. These platforms seem intended to build the community, the trust, the shared purpose among all these founders worldwide, creating the social glue needed for this digital kingdom to actually work. Okay, so we've covered the why, the philosophical rationale, the divine design for flow. We've covered the how, the integrated, automated, on-passive suite. Now we need to pivot to the who. The people intended to drive this whole massive system forward, the founders. And the source defines their identity and role with extraordinary reverence, almost political weight, really.
Absolutely. This is where the rhetorical strategy becomes overtly motivational, almost historical. The participants aren't just called customers or investors. They're the founders, and they're explicitly designated as the first generation of digital citizens in this new global order. That terminology gives them this historic, almost quasi-political identity. It elevates their involvement way beyond just a financial transaction.
And the language used to describe them is full of these metaphors linking their personal success to global growth. They're the seeds that will grow into trees of prosperity across continents, things like that. Plus, the text personalizes the geopolitical ambition too. It says each founder represents a nation, a community, a voice of transformation,
Yeah.
which suggests the prosperity they achieve within the ecosystem is meant to have a direct, positive impact back on their local, offline communities, linking individual gain to collective uplift.
Exactly. And this is where their specific mandate gets spelled out. The message delivered to these founders is intensely spiritual and historical in its claim. They were chosen, it says, chosen to witness, participate, and prosper in the greatest digital reformation of our time. So they're not just joining a startup, according to the source, they're part of a divine, world-changing plan. And it's the nature of the trust placed in them that's really compelling. Mufare, the source claims, hasn't just given them tools, he has entrusted you with a legacy. Their function is critical. They have to be the ambassadors of this AI age, the pioneers of this new ethical fairness, basically spreading the word about the digital kingdom.
And this legacy carries a crucial job, doesn't it? They have to redefine the very nature of wealth for the outside world. Their message is supposed to be specific and transformative. Wealth is no longer tied up in centralized banks. It's not controlled by some elite few anymore. Instead, within this new ecosystem, wealth is governed by three intangible things: belief, ethics, and effort. That's the ultimate rhetorical move, right?
Mm.
Shifting control away from traditional finance towards individual morality and commitment within their defined system.
And that reliance on belief, it's constantly reinforced. It's presented as a prerequisite for success. The source hammers home the necessity of faith, saying faith carried the founders through the early days and gratitude will carry them forward into the promised abundance. It's positioned unequivocally as both a tech movement and a movement based on profound shared conviction. So the final instruction to these foundational citizens is really an active participation mandate. Wealth comes to those who act, believe, and build within the ecosystem. This cements their status. They're not passive recipients, they are the active guardians of the new wealth who have to continuously show commitments to the system. All right, moving towards the conclusion then. Let's look at the predictions the source makes about the outcomes. I mean, they're staggering. The historical legacy this movement expects to leave. The anticipated results are really nothing short of a total global overhaul, according to this text. Yeah, when the ecosystem returns in its full glory, as the source puts it, the prediction is that history will call the whole thing a miracle. That choice of word miracle, again, it elevates the achievement beyond just commerce or tech ingenuity. It suggests something beyond normal human expectation. And the claims about longevity and impact are huge. It's expected to outlive trends and fundamentally redefine economies. To redefine economies. I mean, that implies replacing current assumptions about scarcity, access, distribution with this new flow model they talk about.
And the scope even reaches into political influence. This might be the most audacious prediction of all. The source claims this digital kingdom, because of its inherent integrity and transparency, will actually inspire governments to lead with transparency and intelligence. That suggests a kind of ripple effect, where the system's coded integrity influences national policy, global leadership maybe, setting a new standard for governance based on the automated fairness they claim for the ecosystem.
Right. And this all gets bundled into that higher, almost utopian goal, the global awakening. The source envisions this state where tech advancement meets human compassion, where progress meets global peace. This blend of AI efficiency with ethical purity is the ultimate advertised objective.
And what does all this mean for, the backbone of the global economy, the small business? The ultimate tangible promise for that huge group is that this system will make every small business a global player. That's the core economic democratization promise, right? Using OSHOP and AI to give universal access and unprecedented reach.
And the final historical claim, well, it's the ultimate act of rhetorical self-definition, isn't it? The source essentially pre-writes its own history book entry, asserting that when people look back on this era, they will state unequivocally, here began the digital freedom of nations through the vision of Ashmufare and the courage of his founders.
That is just a staggering statement of historical confidence. It's not just a business summary. And it neatly ties in those key rallying cries that you see throughout the source material. Hashtag victory with Ashmufara and hashtag the wealth off nations begins now. It works as a conclusion, a call to keep going, and an assertion of the movement's, preordained historical significance, all at once. So let's bring this deep dive back to you, the listener, for a moment. We've spent a good chunk of time analyzing this expansive, integrated, AI-driven digital architecture, OConnect, OWallet, OVerify, OShop, all designed according to the source we've examined to achieve a global divine design. The system promises inclusive growth, data sovereignty, sustainable wealth by automating commerce and trying to codify trust. It frames its participants, the founders, as these digital citizens entrusted with a moral, ethical legacy, shifting wealth control from banks to belief.
Right. And that detailed analysis brings us to what I think is the core philosophical question this source really raises for any critical thinker out there. We've looked at the technological integration, the AI managing commerce, finance, verification, marketing, all presented as the mechanism for global prosperity. But the entire thing is framed as this divine design, built on righteousness and integrity. So if technology is truly infused with such a high ethical, even spiritual purpose, as this source claims, how do we, as observers, actually measure the spiritual or ethical success of a fully automated, AI-driven digital kingdom? I mean, if integrity is automated, does that change the fundamental human meaning of integrity? Or does it simply guarantee ethical outcomes? That's the question we'll leave you to ponder, the relationship between code, ethics, and, well, promised miracles. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into some really interesting source material. It's not just outlining a new piece of tech. It feels more like it's laying out a whole new philosophy. We've got these detailed documents describing a digital ecosystem built by Ash Mufareh, who's the founder and CEO of Onin Passive Technologies.
And the language used is, well, it's pretty striking.
It really is. They're calling it a classroom for global growth, framing it as a completely new digital order. So our mission today is going to be very focused, where we're digging into the why behind the source's claims that studying the system isn't just helpful, it's absolutely crucial.
A necessity, even a calling for founders. That's strong stuff.
Exactly. It's presented as fundamental for anyone looking towards the future of business.
Yeah, and what jumps out right away is how they frame it. It's not just presented as, a useful toolkit. The sources are claiming this system is nothing less than the dawn of a new digital order. They say it's engineered to completely reshape how we think about business, automation, even wealth creation. And the core message is pretty clear. If you want to actually benefit from this, you can't just be a passive user. You have to become an active learner.
Okay, let's unpack that term, necessity. The sources really anchor their whole argument on this link between learning and leading. They've actually titled a section, Knowledge, Mastery, and the Foundation of Prosperity. They kick it off with this bold statement, knowledge is the foundation of power. So why is this mandatory learning presented as the absolute core requirement for success in their system? What's the thinking?
Well, it seems to boil down to authority and implementation. They argue that just following instructions, just clicking the buttons, that's not enough. The only way to actually lead others within this system to truly leverage its power is through study. And they're not just talking about, reading a user manual. They draw this philosophical line stating clearly, study leads to mastery, and mastery leads to prosperity.
So it's a sequence. Study first, then mastery, then prosperity.
Exactly. They claim the old way, just chasing the financial results, is flawed. This new system, apparently, demands you master the process itself. Get that right, and the prosperity, they say, will naturally follow.
Okay, if mastery is the key, we need to understand what that actually looks like. Because the sources tie this idea of mastery directly to using specific products. They say these aren't just apps, they're tools you need to learn to handle effectively.
They get very specific with their analogies, yeah. They describe the whole ecosystem like a treasure chest, and mastering each product is like finding a key. So, to make it concrete, because they do use a lot of internal names. For example, learning to use OWallet, that's their internal digital finance hub, means, according to them, you're mastering digital finance itself.
Got it. So OWallet mastery equals digital finance mastery. What about communication or selling things?
Right. So exploring OConnect, which is their platform for video conferencing and global communication, is framed as mastering global communication. Using OShop, their AI-powered e-commerce platform, means mastering modern AI-driven commerce. And they also mention OVerify for trust and data protection as another area essential mastery. Plus tools like Audit, maybe for auditing, and OPeer, perhaps, for networking. They explicitly call each of these a door.
And knowledge is the key to unlock those doors.
That's the metaphor they use, yeah. It really hammers home the point that just scratching the surface isn't enough. Deep, functional understanding mastery is positioned as the only way to get the real benefits.
Okay, so moving from mastering the individual tools to the system's overall structure. This is where the sources get, well, almost philosophical. They claim the architecture itself, the AI automation, the identity checks, like OKYC, reflects a kind of
Divine order.
divine order, structure, balance, purpose, and perfection. That's the quote.
Oh.
They present the system as this meeting point between human genius and divine guidance.
You know, from an analysis perspective, that choice of language, divine order, is probably the most significant rhetorical move in the material we saw.
Why do you say that?
Because linking technological design with spiritual concepts like that does something specific. It implies the design is infallible, it's perfect. So questioning the system isn't just a technical critique. It's framed almost as misunderstanding some kind of fundamental truth.
Huh.
And practically, studying this structure then becomes absolutely vital because they claim the system is designed as a map, not a maze. So if you accept the premise that it's divinely inspired, or at least perfectly structured, then studying it gives you direction and focus. It moves you, the founder, from being confused to feeling confident.
So you know where to click, where to build, how to earn, and how to lead. That's another direct quote they use.
Exactly. And they tie it directly back to leadership with that line. You cannot lead in the future if you are not learning in the present. Study equals future leadership capability, in their view.
So studying provides the map, the structure. But the sources also say it builds community. They emphasize this learning isn't supposed to happen in a vacuum. Studying the system is actually designed to foster unity and collaboration.
Right. Shared knowledge, shared understanding that's meant to create this community of innovators. It turns individual users into sort of partners in the ecosystem.
It almost sounds like a way to standardize the user base.
That's a good way to put it. And there's a specific detail that really highlights the global ambition here. They claim founders all over the world, Kenya, India, Dubai, the US, wherever, start speaking one language, the language of digital empowerment.
Interesting.
It suggests that the shared knowledge isn't just a nice side benefit, it's the actual glue. It's what supposedly transforms this tech platform into a unified global movement, getting past language or cultural barriers through this common digital understanding.
Okay, so understanding the structure gives you the map and the community. Let's talk about what the sources claim happens when you actually use that map. Specifically, this promise of automation and liberation. This is the third big reason they give for mandatory study. Freedom. The sources claim studying the system unlocks the secret of automation.
Yeah, they really push this idea of transferring the burden, all that repetitive, maybe tedious work. That gets shifted onto intelligent AI systems, according to the documents. The argument is that automation, once you really understand it through study, becomes